Hey my good friends, Sam Haymart with Test Driven TV. I am finally test driving the all-new 2024 Toyota Tacoma pickup, and this one, it is the TRD Off-Road double cab short bed, and it's pretty well loaded too. So we are going to take it off the road. I'm going to show it to you inside and out, and then, well, I'm going to tell you what I really think of it. All right, my friends, let's talk about the truck we've got. This is a mid to high level version of the Toyota Tacoma. This is the TRD Off-Road, not all the way up to the TRD Pro. We haven't gotten that yet. This is a double cab, short bed, and all new for 2024. Design is new. All of the bits and parts and pieces are new. This shares barely apart from the last generation Tacoma. With all of the newness, it's built on the TNGA architecture, which it shares with the larger Toyota Tundra, the Sequoia. It's shared with a number of other mid-size SUVs, also new from Toyota, the Land Cruiser, the new 4Runner. Looking at what we've got here, this is a pretty well-loaded version of the TRD Off-Road pickup. Premium package, a number of options. As tested, we are tilting the scales at a pretty, $55,000. Honestly, I think this is one of the more expensive Toyota Tacomas I've ever tested, and we haven't even gotten upstairs to the Trail Hunter or the TRD Pro in terms of what you can do there. But this does have a number of options, which we'll talk about, standalones, which they cost a little bit of money. This does start out around $43,000 for the base model without all of the options. And so what do you get when you step into this trim grade? Well, it is the more off-roady version. It has a better suspension, double wishbone suspension up front, Bilstein shocks, off-road tuned everything. This one happens to have the optional disconnecting sway bar, and we'll get into that on the drive. At the rear, this also has the new for this generation 5-link floating solid rear axle. No leaf springs here, and that is better for articulation. That is better for overall off-roading. Just like that disconnecting sway bar up front, these things all increase the capability of this truck and the drivability as well. TRD gives us some nice looking 17-inch machine face alloy wheels with some very chewy BF Goodrich Trail Terrain TA tires. And underneath, this does not have exactly the same level of skid plate protection that we see on the TRD Pro, but there is a little bit going on there. It's not all metal though. At the back, the cargo box on this Tacoma, just like previous generation Tacoma, is a steel reinforced composite bed, which means plastic. Not a bad thing. It seems to work for everybody. Nobody really complains about it. And this one's well accessorized back there. Power outlets aplenty, cleat system. This one has the big bed mat in it, but this one also has the benefit of the electric power tailgate. Power up, power down. You press the key fob. And honestly, it's kind of a gimmick to me. I mean, do you really need that, especially on a mid-size truck? Do we even need it on a full size, if I'm honest? But it's a cool thing that you can show your friends. And of course, down there you can see also at the lower, under the bumper, you can see that this has a trailer hitch receiver as part of all of the many things that come with this truck. The interior of the new Tacoma, sitting right here where I'm at, is where I see the biggest improvements over the last generation as far as living with it every day. One of the things I was never really happy with about the old generations of the Tacoma is the fact that you really felt like you're sitting on the floor. Your feet were like straight out in front of you. You were sitting much lower to the floor because the cab and the way it was designed was a little bit more like a compact car from the 70s and 80s. And so now, because they've redesigned this seat is feeling like you have a more commanding position. You're sitting up, your legs are going down into the footwell, and that to me is the greatest thing ever. Now, the interior design, very similar to other vehicles from this TNGA platform architecture. It actually looks like a scaled down version of what we see in the Tundra, but the quality here is much better. Much better quality. Just the fit and finish of everything, the actual materials themselves, I think are a bit of a step up. Here we have a lot of controls and a lot of switchgear with all of the options that this vehicle has that have a nice high quality feel to them. They look rugged, they look manly, and they're easy to use. Ahead of me is a 12.3 inch completely digital instrument cluster, and that goes along with this trim grade and a leather wrapped steering wheel. Center stage, part of the upgrade package, is this large 14-inch infotainment screen, which we'll talk about separately. Down below that, controls for the heated and ventilated seats, which these are. These are Softex, which is vinyl, not leather. They are comfortable, though I am sort of sweating and getting sticky on them. Why? Because they're not leather. A little bit of an omission, in my opinion, at this price tag. I just feel that there should be leather here. Putting vinyl in here is kind of a cheap out, even if they give it a fancy name like Softex and give it some nice pretty patterns to look at. I would just prefer to have the cloth seats in the base model. Back to this center stack, nice big knobs for the climate control system, buttons and toggles down below that for a number of the climate control and other settings. Down here in the center console, a nice big visible spot for your phone, whether you have the wireless charger or not. And there's actually space here for 2 different phones, plus ports to plug those in. Big traditional shifter in the center, and then to the left of that, the spin knob for all of the various traction toys, the drive modes, and the selector for the 2-speed transfer case. Very well done. It's a multifunction switch. It looks cool and it works very easily. Down below here are the switches for some of the other cool little toys that this has, and we'll talk about those as we get out for the drive. Cup holders down low so you can have big tall gas station cups. And then storage in here, I would say this is about the size of 1.5 square tissue boxes. It's about that deep, but a little bit larger around. It's got a little carpeted pad down there, but what it's missing are USB ports for charging in there. But there's one over here on the side of this infotainment system. So there's no shortage of actual charging ports in here. It's just that they don't have any inside of the console box. Over on the left, because of the trim grade we have, are auxiliary switches, which I absolutely love. I think those should be standard in any truck that's got aspirations for off-roading or just camping, things like that. These are well done. They are part of the premium trim grade that comes with this truck. The rear seat of the Tacoma double cab is a place that I was really hoping, I had my hopes up, would be dramatically improved over the last generation pickup truck, and I've got to tell you, it really just isn't. There is one improvement, and that is that the seating height is a little higher off the floor, just like the front seats, but the amount of space that I have back here, comfort and legroom, hasn't really made a big improvement. And Ford and Chevrolet have both made, well, they're a better place to be if you're all about the back seat. Let me just put it like that. These seats are set for my height, about 5'9" with my boots on. My knees are literally against the backs of these seats right now, so if anyone was taller, wanted the seat further back, I would be in trouble. Secondly, the amount of space underneath these seats, my boots will not slide under these seats. Right now, my boots are kind of stuck in that little space between the bottom of the seat and the floor, and there's not really any way for me to move and slide my feet around too much back here. It's pretty cramped. The other thing that the back seat doesn't offer up is AC vents on the back of the console. We're at $55,000 here. That is unforgivable in my opinion. If we were at $20,000, $25,000 maybe, but it's well over 100 degrees right now in this back seat. I do not have AC blowing on me like I do at the front. Another thing that's missing back here is a fold-down armrest. There's no fold-down armrest back here, and that's an omission too. That's an omission, especially at this price. If we were in the base model, I'd get that, but we spent $8,000+ for a premium package here in this vehicle, and there's nothing there. Now, versatility. They have done a good job here. These seats fold in a 60-40 split. The lower cushions fold upward, and that gives you a nice big well down there in which to store things. It's pretty deep, and the way it's made, there's a lot of storage space down there, at least on the gas model. With the hybrid, the battery is going to be under this seat. But that's not all. These rear seats actually fold down as well. You can lay them down flat with the headrest folded, and that way you have a nice big deck back here if you want to be able to stack things up and not actually put them on your seat. Overall, this is an interior that I am greatly impressed with from the standpoint of its improvement over the last generation. The interior of the previous generation Tacoma just wasn't that livable in my opinion. It was smaller feeling. The quality was fine, but there weren't a lot of creature comforts available to us. Things like heated and ventilated power seats, infotainment systems, digital this, that, and the other, and all of the niceties that this one has with the packaging weren't even available then. If you don't need all of that, fine, you don't have to have it, but the fact that we have a larger, roomier interior overall, at least for the front seat passengers, is a big, big improvement. Rear seat, like we talked about, still kind of not the place you want to put adults, but the big picture is that this is a much improved interior. It gets 4 out of 5 stars. The infotainment system here is Toyota's top-of-the-line connected cloud-based system with a lot of feature content. It has JBL audio. It has that cool Bluetooth speaker up at the dash that you can pull off and take out to the back and have a bit of a tailgate and be able to have sound out there. Kind of a nice little gimmick, but it is actually a practical tool. And this also is fully featured. It has satellite radio, AM, FM, Bluetooth connectivity. It has Android Auto. It has Apple CarPlay. Those are both wireless. It has navigation. And with that, there are a lot of connected services where you can actually get data on the road, live traffic, all of those things. The problem is a lot of that stuff that they advertise that they really sell you on is subscription based. So, you know, it's one thing if that was down in a lower trim grade, but here we are, we're spending $55,000 for this. It kind of turns me off that I have to pay a subscription to get a lot of things in addition to satellite radio. We've become used to that, but if you want a lot of the other features that make this good, you have to spend up. What it does have is a great camera system. This has a multi-terrain monitor version of the 360-degree camera, which means that this has infinite ways that you can get views on where you're at and what you're doing. I mean, you can just spend time and go through them. And there's also some little gauges down there that tell you where you are in terms of your attitude out there off-road. This is a great system. Even for just parking and getting in the mall parking lot, it's a good 360-degree camera, but with all of the various camera views and the three-dimensional fly around, you have the ability to quite literally see everything around this vehicle. If you're in a spot and you want to make sure you're not going to run over anything, be it out there off-roading and you don't want to hit a bush or a rock, or maybe it's the kid's tricycle in your blind spot that you can't see with the mirrors. So a great system in that way. Now the audio system, JBL, again, I mentioned this is the top of the line with everything, but sound quality, I don't know why, but JBL systems in Toyotas just never really quite cut the mustard for me in terms of sound quality. When you look at Harman Kardon, Bose, and a lot of what the other brands offer, they just tend to sound better. And so why that is, I don't know, but it's a thing that's been that way for quite some time. So stepping back and giving a score to this system, the screen visibility is great because it's so big. But using it every day, the menus, navigating the menus, not the most intuitive system, and the fact that so much of what's great about this system is a paid subscription, kind of a turnoff. This system gets 4 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, it's finally time to take a drive, and because we're in this kind of a vehicle, we're going to start our drive out here on the trail. And so, this is the new Tacoma, and I've been looking forward to this because I've had a lot to say about the previous generation Tacomas and their competitors, about how their competitors have really gotten ahead of the game, at least Tacoma's game in my opinion, in the way of chassis refinement, capability, and just what it's like to live with. The TRD Off-Road is a nice middle ground choice for having extra capability out here in the wild above and beyond the street, but not spending up and going all the way for the enthusiast who really does hardcore off-roading all the time and needs those tools. But we do have tools here. We have the aforementioned disconnecting sway bar. We have the rear locker, and we have a 2-speed transfer case. Now, I'm gonna put this in 4-low. I'm gonna put it in neutral. I'm in 4-low, and the reason I'm doing that is twofold. I wanna be able to get the turbo boost up so I can experience the power and torque, and the low gearing will enable this engine to spin at a higher RPM, and the throttle is adjusted differently, so it's really good for crawling up a hill and having that nice peak power. The second reason is I want to be able to engage the rear locker, which this has. Electronic rear locker, press a button, locks the axle, so if I get hung up on a mogul up here, I can do that. However, Another tool here is the optional disconnecting front sway bar, which allows for the front suspension to articulate more so that the likelihood one of my rear wheels will come off the ground is less when I get to the mogul. So I'm going to start with using the disconnecting sway bar as my off-road toy, and if I need to kick in with the locker, then so be it. So the first thing I'm really noticing about this new truck and its new platform is that it just feels a little bit more solid and robust. The fact that I've got a multi-link rear suspension and the fact that I've got the disconnected sway bar up here allows this truck to feel a little bit less stiff, like it's working against you, crawling up and over and around a lot of the terrain. So right here is a mogul that often lifts a rear wheel and causes me traction headaches. But because that front suspension is able to articulate, I'm able to let the suspension drop and twist in a way that doesn't require me to engage the extra locking mechanism. Now, turning circle on this does require that I do a bit of a 3-point turn here. And now I'm going to go down a hill pretty steep. Now this does have all of the electronic aids that you can think of, hill descent control being one of them, and it's got the other software program. Allows you to be able to set a speed, and this will control itself going downhill automatically, uphill. It's like a slow speed cruise control that's tied into all of the traction. Just the fact that I'm in 4 low is a pretty good way of controlling my downhill trajectory. I don't have to engage all of that unless I had maybe some really slippery stuff that was going on. But now I am out of the worst of that. So I'm going to put it in neutral here and get back out of 4 low. There's 4 high. And then I'm going to turn off the disconnecting sway bar. So I'm going to put it in drive and all that stuff goes away. Now I'm back into street mode because this is just a little bit more of a relaxed trail, not a big deal. And really what I'm looking for here is how this feels, just kind of blowing and going along a little bit more of a regular trail. And I'm happy to say this feels great. This chassis is such a big improvement over the last generation. It just feels of quality. It doesn't feel junky anymore. I'm not getting rattling or shaking or shuddering in the suspension or steering. It's just so much better. And that's really what I was hoping for. And I was hoping for this because the Tundra, which is based on a larger version of this chassis, hasn't impressed me in that way. But this feels like it's really almost from a different company. It has the same level of stiffness and the solid refinement and isolation from this rough, bumpy road that I'm normally looking for in a Jeep Wrangler. And with these extra toys this has, the TRD Off-Road and the optional, it's really up there in the way of capability as well. So yeah, so good job Toyota in giving me a much better chassis than before for being out here in the bush. Now for something a little bit more vanilla, but still pretty robust in the way of how it puts this truck to the test, and that of course is the desert washboard road. And while it's not ruts and bumps and rocks on the trail, this washboard surface can really make a vehicle feel like a giant POS. And quite honestly, previous generation Tacomas have not felt all that well bolted together out here. Vehicles like the Ford Ranger and the Chevrolet Colorado have much better bested it on this very surface. But here I am once again impressed on how solid, how rubberized, how lack of shudders and shakes and rattles this ride has become. And the steering feel, much better than before. I do have a little bit of fluttering in the hood, meaning that the cheap aluminum hood that I've noticed on some Toyotas of late is kind of bouncing and dancing around there. And a little bit of rattling in the dash, but not bad. I'm not getting a full-blown twisting, dancing structure like in the last generation Tacoma. This feels very good out here. On the pavement, this is a vehicle that's actually quite stable and quiet in spite of having an off-road suspension. Out on the highway, 70 miles an hour, the decibel test comes in at 59.1 decibels, which is just below the average point, which is about 60 to 61. So it's relatively quiet, and I'm not getting a lot of noise from these tires. It's stable, doesn't seem to have a lot of susceptibility to wind noise, and most importantly, it just feels the quality like I've been saying. It's a very well done chassis, and I'm very happy with it. It gets 4.5 out of 5 stars. So now it's time to talk about powertrain, and if you watch my videos, you know the question I always like to ask is, how does it go? So we're going to come to a complete stop, and then I'm going to put the power to it. You can hear it. It's working. And 60. So, this is what everybody's been hoping for, more power and torque in the Toyota Tacoma, and it's here. 270 horsepower, 310 pound-feet of torque from its 2.4 liter turbocharged engine. You can get more if you step up to the iForce Max, but this is the base powertrain in most of the mid-grade and up models. There is a less powerful version of this down in the cheapest truck, but all of them, including this one, have a very nicely done 8-speed automatic transmission. So it does have the power and the torque, and as we discovered out there on the trail, all it takes is a little bit of rev, and that translates pretty nicely. So it's not something where you feel like, oh, it's a turbo engine, I really have to wind it out to get the power. It seems to come on pretty fast, and there's very little turbo lag. Efficiency, 19 city, 23 highway, and 21 MPG combined is what they tell us. Well, I didn't quite get that this week. I got about 18 miles per gallon in my driving this week, but in fairness, the air conditioner has been on at all times, and well, I like using the power. And you can hear it. It does make some noise. It is a 4-cylinder engine, so it does work. You know, you can hear it doing its job under there. At the end of the day, it has delivered what most customers have asked for: more horsepower, more torque, and this transmission allows the engine to be in its sweet spot more often than the previous generations with their other transmissions. So this is a powertrain that I'm impressed with, although it's still a little bit thirsty. This powertrain gets 4 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, now we finally come to the point in time where we talk about, is it worth the money? Is it a good value? Is it competitive? Well, it's all new from the ground up. The last generation or two of the Tacoma, in my opinion, were essentially, the last 2 generations were essentially the same truck. It didn't change that much from one to the other. And so the last truck was getting pretty darn old in a lot of ways. The hardware, the bones, how it felt, the powertrain, the interior, on and on and on and on. It was the best seller, but it still had drum brakes, for crying out loud. And so here we are, we've got an all new truck, brand new powertrain, brand new chassis, brand new interior. This is quite literally the best Toyota Tacoma I have ever driven in a lot of ways, and we talked about most of those. I really like the fact that I don't feel like sitting on the floor anymore inside like I'm in a little compact car. It's got a real truck interior, and to me that's the biggest, oh, that's great. But a lot of people have been bitching and moaning and sending letters and emails to Toyota for decades saying what they wanted in a new Toyota Tacoma, and this is pretty much what they've come up with. It's a good deal. And the best part about this truck for me is the fact that, having driven a number of Tundras and the Sequoia, the larger full-size expanded version of this chassis platform, I have not been impressed with those, because they don't feel like quality, they don't feel like connectedness, they don't feel like the solid Toyota trucks that came before them. That's not the case here, and I am so happy about this. This feels like it's almost from a different company than the Tundra, at least in terms of quality, fit and finish, and just how well bolted together and solid it feels by comparison. And that's bizarre in some ways, because it shares most of its chassis and platform and a lot of little things inside and out, but it really doesn't feel like just a smaller version. It feels like the one they started with and then, you know, puffed it up into the Tundra, and it didn't quite work out so good. So this is good. This is good. I'm happy with it. We saw that in the scoring along the way getting to this point. And so the price, $55,000. This is the most expensive Tacoma I think I've ever tested. And as I mentioned earlier on, it's likely that you're going to spend quite a bit more going into a well-loaded Trail Hunter or a TRD Pro. So 55, I have a friend who has a Tacoma TRD Off-Road last generation, a couple years old. He's looking at this new truck, wondering about, should I not? He's been excited waiting to see what this is going to be. And I said, well, gosh, this thing's $55,000. He said, well, I paid 45 for mine years ago. But I'm also, I guess maybe I'm getting older. I kind of think, gosh, 55 grand, not that long ago, would get you a pretty well done Tundra in the last generation. So all that aside, keep in mind that this does start at $43,000 for this trim grade, and 55 is just because we've loaded everything on it, a lot of that stuff inside. So is it a good value? Well, the appeal, yes, of course, all new design. It's a good looking truck, and it's probably going to continue to be the top seller in the class just because it's what the popular kids want, buy, and will be seen in. It's just how it works in this world. But does it back up what you look at? Does it walk its talk? Yes, it is the best driving. It is probably the best performing, in spite of the fact that there's a lot of people out there that are just not sure about this turbo engine stuff. Good luck getting away from it in the future. Really, if you want a not turbo engine, you're going to have to go with the Nissan Frontier. All of that said, I put value here at 4 out of 5 stars. When you put that in with everything we've already talked about, cha-ching, we are at 4.1 out of 5 stars for the total review score. Yeah, so there you go. Now I cannot wait to test drive, say, I like a base model if I'm honest, to sort of see how that drives, as well as perhaps obviously a Trail Hunter and a TRD Pro. That'll be later, but for now we're in the upper mid grade, and it's good. You should go look at them. Yeah, until then, you can see our latest video right there. Better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there. Either way, stay tuned.